Again, all right. So, yeah, we'll go ahead and just get started. For those of you who are here, thank you. Welcome in to Flemma Chats, where we sit down with people who are cool, have some interesting things to say. We like to shine a light on things that are important, whether it's something that needs attention or it's something to celebrate. And I feel like today we got a little bit of both, which is exciting. I'm here with Rachel Voss, and we're going to talk about some accessibility in gaming, a broad swath of different ways to kind of talk about um, important aspects of accessibility, things that things that we can celebrate about what's going on now, things that we can look forward to in the future, and a lot about Forge Ahead, which is an organization that I'll let kind of Rachel explain in more detail, but is also very exciting. Welcome to the show, Rachel. How you doing today?
I am doing very great.
Good.
Thank you for having me and
Thank you for
inviting
being
me
here.
to come and speak about this important topic of
Absolutely.
accessibility as well as disability representation as a
Right.
whole in gaming.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was excited whenever our mutual friend mentioned you and said that you might be interested in talking with me. I got really hyped up about it. Learned that we had actually gone to school together. That was an interesting thing too. That was fun to kind of have that revelation. Um, but yeah, I think it's really cool the stuff that you're doing. We talked a couple weeks ago, and I thought that the journey that you had talked about, your journey in particular, right, is such a fascinating one. And so, what I want to do to start this is just kind of get to know you a little bit more and kind of hear, let people here know like a little bit about who you are and like what your journey has been up to this point, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
For sure.
So my name is Rachel Voss, and my daytime I work for the award-winning Champaign Park District, connecting individuals with programs and recreation, fun stuff. So I just like love saying I'm in the business of fun
Come on.
because I'm either doing parks and recreation stuff or I'm doing gaming stuff.
Awesome.
And so I I'm also a manual wheelchair user. I have been a manual wheelchair user since I was 12 years old. I have a spinal arterial venous malformation or a spinal AVM, that's veins and arteries wrapped around my spinal cord.
Sure.
Didn't know I had until I woke up from a nap and I couldn't walk. That led me down to a really long athletics career in wheelchair basketball, track, field swimming, weightlifting. I made my first Team USA national team was when I was 16, and we went to South Africa. And then I set a South
Awesome.
African shot put record. Lots of things happened when I
Absolutely.
was 16.
Amazing. Amazing.
Lots of things.
Yeah.
And then I ended up uh, going to University of Illinois, and that's where I am now in Champaign with the Champaign Park District in Champaign, Urbana.
Love it.
And I went to school for wheelchair basketball, tried out for the national team 5 years in a row, which means I was one of the top 25 women's wheelchair basketball players in the U.S. five
Come
years
on.
in a row. I
Come on.
made the national team my last year. It was an off year. It wasn't a Paralympic year, so I'm not a Paralympian, but I'm still made a national team.
I mean,
And I've
come on.
tried out for two Paralympics, so that's pretty great. In two different sports, so that's fun too. So,
Sure.
yeah, so I just had this huge athletic career. Like I said, I'm a manual wheelchair user full time. I strive for independence for as many people with disabilities as possible, whatever that independence looks like for them. And so what I do for fun, what I my preferred form of recreation is tabletop role playing games in particular. I do love like video games and all that kind of stuff, but I love tabletop role playing games.
Sure.
And so got into Dungeons and Dragons in college. My roommate said that if I lived with her, that I had to roll a character and play. So that's how it
Gotta
started.
do
So I
what you gotta
kind of
do.
started off as
Right.
this casual player,
Right.
and so this idea of this creating an organization had never really crossed my mind until I saw the release of Strata Miniatures, which is this mini figure company in England.
Right.
They wanted to support Sarah Thompson, or Mustangs are combat wheelchair mechanics for Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder.
Right.
And so there were these awesome miniatures, fantasy characters that use wheelchairs. There was this elf rogue character. I just saw myself. I had the undercut at the time. This elf rogue had an undercut,
Hell yeah.
has like daggers that are lining their wheels, and all these other like really cool characters. And so I jumped into the comment section, and it was posted in some random D&D group that I was in that had, it was very large, hundreds of thousands of people in this
Sure.
group. And the majority of the comments were very negative. We're very ableist. We're very laughing at the idea of a disabled fighter. All these different like ableist things happening within the comment section. And so I took some time to address some of the comments, and got into it with this one person back and forth after explaining, no, I'm a Team USA athlete.
Right.
I know several people that could bench over 300 pounds, and like how like I myself in my prime could bench 250. Like why is this such an issue?
Right.
And his response was to me directly, not about a character, not about because we have had this back and forth for a while about we're talking about real people. And
Sure.
his response was, "You'd be a burden to the group." And so at that point, I
uh
realized that I was wasting my time,
sure.
that our negative perspective of disability due to lack of disability representation in the media, in gaming, lack of accessibility in gaming, all of these different things has caused this ableist community to form in the
Right.
group that in the gaming community that I love. And so instead of fighting people in comment sections, I decided to try my hand at designing something for the first time. And
Love it.
I designed chairs, like one of the arguments was that these fantasy wheelchairs would be too expensive. And it's like, well, wheelchairs now are too expensive. They're the
Right.
price of a car.
Right.
And so just like that comment was laughable.
Right.
But one thing that I do personally to make sure that to like reduce my cost is to do my own chair maintenance, right? To like fix my own chair. So that was where I started. I was like, well, what if there's this fantasy toolkit that I could just start with? And so that's where I just kind of started and caught the attention of another disabled gamer. Their name is Wesley McGee Saxon. They live in Canada, and we decided to Forge Ahead a Party to Access,
Love
which
it.
is all about designing fun mobility aids within role playing games, specifically Dungeons and Dragons. But Cortex role playing is big on our mind. Pathfinder, of course, is huge, and then Spire and Blade, like the in the Dark series, the Blades in the Dark series,
Okay.
would be great for us to like trying to just add more disability representation,
Absolutely.
disability representation into these games,
Absolutely.
as well as teaching designers and game masters and all this stuff how to view disability within their games, because
Sure.
disability is not a bad word. And if you have a positive perspective of disability, you can create some really amazing stories.
Absolutely. And so you touched on a little bit there. So, and I kind of want to go a little bit more in depth on that. So, um, forge ahead, right? You talked about you're wanting to, you're doing all these wonderful things. What's your end goal? Like, what is your ideal future when it comes to like what you guys are providing? You may have already kind of answered this question. I'm kind of reading off the prompter that I had here, so really kind of backtrack a little bit. Um,
Yeah, no,
and I'll
of
say,
course. Like,
yeah. Oh, you go ahead. Go ahead. If you,
so our main goal is to try to increase disability, like make disability representation a household thing
right,
across all media genres, right? We want to assist in creating authentic disabled characters across all intersectionality. So we have disability is unique in a lot of cultures because it can cross all cultures. We can have people represented within the LGBTQ, our BIPOC community, disability, all those layers could be within one person. And so we want to strive to create multi-intersectional disabled characters essentially, and just be the basically just be the forefront of disability representation,
sure.
and just to shift that perspective of disability.
For sure. And so I remember when we were talking a couple weeks ago, you had some experiences that you've already been able to be a part of. One of them being the Game Developers Conference that you went to. Could you kind of talk to us a little bit about that and tell, like, kind of explain what that experience was like for you? Because I remember when we were talking about it before, something very exciting. There was a lot going on, like, and just what that meant to you, being able to like show that and kind of be there, and something that's widely known as one of the biggest kind of meeting of the minds for people who are in gaming and developing games and that kind of thing.
Yes, the Game Developers Conference was mind blowing.
Sure.
There were so many great things that happened. It was my first time ever going to GDC, as well as being invited to speak. I did present about the importance of disability representation and shifting our
Right.
perspective of disability in the gaming. And I presented on Monday, so very first day. It was Monday morning, got it out of the way.
That's a lot. That's a lot. That's a
And
lot, though, man. To be like
it
at the
was a
forefront. You know
lot.
what I mean? Like the headliner, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was, and it was right before lunch too, so that was also an interesting timing, but
Sure.
it was great. It was an interesting experience, I think, for GDC as well, because the reason why I was invited to speak was in November. I am friends on Facebook with a gentleman named Sen. He lives in Canada. He is very big in the game developers community
Sure.
and has made a lot of different fun games like the Pro Bending, Legend of Korra Pro Bending board game, as
Okay.
well as the Rat Queens card game, and Mind Management, which is this big, huge like RPG that's happening. That's amazing. I haven't got my hands on Mind Management yet, but I
Okay.
want to play it.
Sure.
So he had posted that GDC was looking for a more diverse speakers group, specifically in role playing games. And I was like, oh, that's
Yeah.
me.
Hey.
And so I reached out, and they ended up like very much advocating for me and the things that I really wanted to bring to the gaming industry. And so, very fortunate for to have that connection. Thanks, Sen. I love you so much. And so, because of that, even when I was talking to other speakers at the speaker party, they're like, "Have you ever been here?" I was like, "No, I haven't been here." And they're like, "Oh, and you're invited to speak." So, even just like hearing that was like super exciting.
Yeah.
But then, having at my presentation, having not just like people who do tabletop role playing games. It was people who play board games, people
Right.
who do VR games, right, video games. There was so many different game designers that were just there at one point.
Yeah.
And oh, someone from the CDC was there because of VR technology and trying to understand training using VR.
That's awesome.
And so it was just like you said, it's just like a big, there was 28,000 people there throughout the entire experience, just going to as many roundtables as possible. I think one of the most memorable times, I think that especially in the conversation we talked about, was being at the narrative roundtable
Yeah. I remember you
and
talking about that.
sitting
Yes.
at literally speaking, actively speaking about disability representation with the people who wrote Skyrim, like the head writers for Skyrim, the head writers for Last of Us.
Yes.
Um,
Oh, when you told me that, I was geeking out. I was like, that's so mind blowing to be able to sit down and talk to them. One, because we've already talked about this, and I think I did the same thing last time we were talking. Is like Naughty Dog has always, I felt like, been one of the main ones when it comes to video games, right? I play a lot more video games than I play tabletop games. I love tabletop games. I'm finding a new love for it the more and more I play it. But for me, Naughty Dog's always been the ones like right in the forefront, like when it comes to disabilities or when it comes to accessibility specifically, right? And it was always little things at first, right? But you've seen other kind of developers follow suit. So when you were saying that you got to sit down and talk to them, and not only just like talk to them and like kind of chit chat, but like talk about something so important and be able to bring your perspective and to be heard from them, and just kind of reinforce the idea that it's so good to see. You don't see that very often. You don't see very many opportunities for someone to be able to speak to the experience, right? And you don't see a lot of people listening to that, right? And so it's nice to see that trend start to change. Just so, like from a nerd perspective, just so I mean, geeking out. I'd imagine you were on cloud nine. Couldn't imagine what that was like.
Oh,
That's awesome.
it was they would say some stuff, or I'd be like, I didn't look at the person's badge before I started talking to them, and they're
Sure.
like, "Yeah, I'm here, blah blah blah." Oh, you're with Wizards of the Coast. Oh, okay.
Oh, cool. Whatever.
That's just the
No big
people
deal.
who I'm trying to talk to. Okay,
Right.
that's fine. And
Just
you're coming to
casually.
me to talk to me. Okay,
Right.
sure.
Come
Let's talk. Let's
on.
talk.
That's so
Um,
cool, though. You're a rock star to them. How neat is that? That's so cool. So cool. So
So
cool.
it was an amazing experience.
Yeah.
Just hearing how this is a forefront on the industry's mind. They just don't have the connections
Right.
or the connections to just like the mass of people with disabilities, like the disabled
Right.
community.
Right.
And what we are doing at Forge Ahead is we're really actively trying to turn our friends, like people with disabilities, into fantasy characters.
Love
And
that.
what would that look like?
Right.
So it is authentic disability representation across the board because it's real people with disabilities that we are transforming into these fantasy worlds. And like
Amazing.
the one of them, Grawin, was one of the first ones we did. She's my friend Grace. She was on my wheelchair basketball team when we were in juniors. She is a phlebotomist and
Nice.
like
Okay.
super sciency kind of human. And her preferred form of recreation is darts. Like she loves to go throw
Sick.
darts.
Cool.
And so we just took like a whole all that combination. She ends up being this alchemist. Fun that like she's like an alchemist that throws poison darts,
That's awesome.
and that she wanted to throw her cat in there. So she has these like little shadow cats and all these other little fun things.
Great.
It's been a lot of fun just to like look at my friends and like be like, all right, what do you love to do? And then just turn them into this fantasy character and provide that representation for them.
Yeah.
Because when we turned my friend Macrodot, we turned him into a character. He was like, I want to be the Avatar. And I
Hell
was
yeah.
like,
Hell yeah. Come on.
okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's turn you into the Avatar. And we put him into this big storyline that we're creating at the Forge for our own campaign guide. But we showed Mac his picture, his like the art we got done. He's like, this is a fantasy I didn't know I had.
Oh, I love that.
And so
Oh.
just being able to provide that
Yeah.
representation for the people that I love, as well as just like extending throughout the community, it's been great.
Absolutely. It reminds me, a lot of this again. I've said this a couple times now, but this reminds me of the conversation we were having, the other day. And one thing that you had said in that conversation, and this is connected and not right. It's kind of just a little bit of a tangent, but um, the something that stuck with me, and it will probably stick with me for the rest of my life. And that's, you have those few interactions with people, and I feel like sometimes somebody says something and it just lodges itself there. And it was something that was a challenge to me because it wasn't something that I realized that I was missing, but I really was. And it was talking about the idea that the representation that we see now for people with disabilities, for those in a wheelchair specifically, right? You were talking about how it's always seen as this the freedom comes from escaping or leaving the wheelchair, right? From getting out of the wheelchair. You talked about Avatar, the James Cameron Avatar movie, and you gave me a bunch of other examples then too. But the sentence or the way that you phrase it, that stuck with me is just that the freedom comes from that you get that you don't need to escape the chair to have that freedom, right? And that doing this, that providing this representation is showing that freedom. And I'm trying to think about the exact way you phrased it now. I can't remember the exact way
Yeah,
you phrased it,
I
but
got you.
that
I
idea, right, was just so interesting to me because you don't see that enough, right? And that's all the representation you see most of the time is somebody being like, well, I've got to find a way to get out of this situation, when reality is that situation is giving you that freedom. That's the way you said it. You're like, it
Mhm.
gives you freedom. It's not taking away your freedom.
Yes,
And I just thought that was
like
so
a
interesting.
wheelchair, cane, walker, forearm crutches. Those are all mobility aids,
Right.
and they all are. They're not a prison to be confined to.
Right.
They are tools for freedom and independence that we use every day so that we can survive,
Right.
and it shouldn't be seen as something that is a negative thing. So you mentioned James Cameron's Avatar. I will
Right.
talk trash about this movie as
Oh,
much as
trash
possible.
talking. Go ahead. I mean, listen.
So why I really hate this movie in particular is how terrible the disability representation is. One, Sam Worthington is a typically developed actor. They don't necessarily always CGI his legs. When he's seen in a chair, he's actually just kneeling, and they casted this the legs of, I think it's Josh Rosengrant is that his name is, his legs. So they physically turned disability into a prop by creating fake legs for Sam Worthington to have in his chair.
I hate that.
So that's another thing that's terrible disability
Yeah.
representation. But every time you see him using a chair, it's gray, it's drab, like it
Right.
seems like it's lifeless. And
Right.
then he switches over to this other, his walking form, and life seems beautiful.
Right.
And the only way for him to escape this confinement of this jail sentence of being a wheelchair user is to die. And
Right.
that is the story that is given. And I know that like that movie needed a lot of help on the plot, but don't like crush disability
Right.
to be
It's
able
you
to
made it
give you
worse. Not
something.
only is it like a ripoff of all these other movies like Fern Gully and Pocahontas, we've heard those arguments for years now, right? But it's also like
Mhm.
super ableist, like you said, and super just gross. It's even more gross, right? Not only is it just bad, it's also it's infuriating. I did not know that about the Rosencrantz or whatever you said their name was, right? I did not know that they did that, and that's even more like just disgusting sounding. Like, wow, wow.
Mhm.
Um,
It blew. I thought it was just CGI, but no, they
yeah, that's what I thought
actually
too.
you turned it into a prop.
Oh, that's disgusting.
Um, my when it was our turn, right? When it was my turn to start designing characters, I wanted to start with me.
Sure.
So I turned myself into a character,
Right.
Rain Vosgrove. She also has a fantasy, that default fantasy voice, because why not?
Why not?
Um,
Come on. I love it.
and so Rain is great. She's a monk. I wanted to really also just like highlight the hand-to-hand combat ableism comments we were getting when we were
Sure.
first seeing the combat wheelchair minis. And I really wanted to showcase and highlight the relationship one has with their chair. So Rain doesn't necessarily always use a wheelchair. She has her best friend Flux,
Okay.
which Flux is a mimic. And he ends up turning into the mobility aid she needs at the time.
That's cool. That's
And
really cool.
so, really highlighting that there is a relationship between a wheelchair user and their
Right.
chair, and it can be a positive one.
Right.
And so, just really making sure that that is seen, because that's not seen in media.
No, it's not.
Um, yeah, and so when it is, it's seen differently, or like you see, I like don't want to like take away from this family's experience by any means, but there is this big picture that goes around the internet sometimes that's someone child passed away, and they used a wheelchair throughout their life, but they the grave, the headstone was a chair, like a child standing up out of a wheelchair, and was like, you're finally free. And it's like,
Right.
yes, grieve the way you need to. I'm not going to take away from that, but
Absolutely.
that was because of some internalized ableism that they
Right.
have and were taught by society. So,
Sure.
if we are able to celebrate disability and showcase what we can do and highlight our strengths while acknowledging our limitations through story, we will be able to open up a world of new game lines,
Right.
new characters, new stories that have never been told because we were told that no one wanted to hear them.
Right.
But people want to hear them.
Oh yeah.
GDC alone was the example of people wanting to hear them.
Absolutely. No, I think that's so exciting. And yeah, it's you're right. You're right. It's like it seems like a no-brainer even too. You know what I mean? It seems like so simple to just be like, okay, no duh, like we want more interesting stories besides. I mean, we like you can think about this when return in regards to just about anything, right? It's always been a bunch of cis white straight dudes. They're the lead. Let's tell a story and let's find some new way about why they're depressed about whatever. Blah 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 blah. They're the victim. Blah blah blah. Right? And it's been
Hmm.
so boring for so long. And you are starting to see a trend where it's changing when it comes to race, when it's coming to gender identity. Right? You're seeing a lot of those things when it comes to sexuality. You're seeing more diverse stories, and you're seeing it by not doing these cliches and not leaning into that ableism or into that the stereotypes or what have you, but just treating people as people, right? Because that's what it all boils down to, right? We all have our own limitations. We all have our strengths. We all have these things that make us who we are. And to the what you're doing and what your goal is and what you're trying to do is so inspiring, because it's so inspiring, but it's also just like so like simple at the same time. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, hey, there are people here that we've been, like not giving. You don't want to put a spotlight and try to. I'm losing myself a little bit. I'm very excited. I get very
Yeah.
excited when these
You're
things
good.
happen, and then I get kind of tongue tied, and my brain's all over the place. But it's just really cool what you're talking about when you're saying these things, when you're talking about being able to all these new ideas and all these new stories that can be told. I'm so excited for the next decade plus, moving forward and seeing these things, and finding the ways to incorporate these things into these stories, and it making these things so much more interesting and just not the same old thing over and over and over and over again.
Mhm.
Because you're right, you could tell so many new and fascinating and interesting stories and challenge what people think um, about people who have disabilities, or people who have use a cane, using a wheelchair, all these different things, and making anybody badass just is so cool, because we're again tired of seeing the same old straight white dude being this badass person. Let somebody else celebrate that there's people out there.
Yeah,
um
I have an Oracle movie, like a DC Oracle movie, just kind of going through my brain at all times,
oh
like all times.
oh
And
What's your
so
idea? What's
that's
your
what
idea?
that's.
Can you get a couple details about what you think? What do you want to do with it?
There's a lot of, I mean, it would be her origin story, right? It would be
Sure.
within 6 months of her becoming disabled. It'd be her really understanding that she needs to shift her own perspective of, because before, like, I mean, Batgirl's very physical, right? She's
Right?
doing the acrobatics and
Yeah.
all this stuff. So she has to really shift and understand what her new strengths are. And it's
Oh
her
man.
learning
Yeah.
that her, like, understanding what you have in control and pattern recognition, and just like it's like her becoming the oracle, and
Oh.
just coming to terms with her new body.
Yeah.
And there's fight scenes. There's a stripper pole fight scene in my brain,
Okay.
where she climbs up a stripper pole and is like ends up fighting that
Oh, that's
way.
cool. That's cool.
So that's one thing.
Yeah.
There's like there's a whole, I have bits and pieces
Yeah.
of
Right.
it,
Right.
but
Right.
it's like her, like I said, her exploring her new life and coming to grips with it and figuring out what are her new strengths.
Oh, James Gunn. I know you're watching right now. I know right now you're paying close attention. I need you to get on top of this. I need you to get in touch with Rachel right now. Make this shit happen in this new DCU. How cool would that freaking be, man? That would
It'd be
be
awesome.
fascinating, right? Wow, that's such a cool. That'd be great. That'd be great. I
The
love
only
that.
thing I have right now that's tangible is I've thrown together a Spotify playlist on
Oh,
like what music. It's my concept album, because it's
yeah.
like I don't have time to write
Yeah,
this
right. It's a
script
lot. It's a
right
lot.
now,
Right.
but it is something that I would love to do.
Oh man.
Is to dive into some actual superhero disability stuff.
Has there been an Oracle comic?
Well, there's a lot of like the Oracle's in the comics a
Yeah,
lot,
but I mean, like, is there one centered
but
on her? I don't think there has been, has there? Which I'm shocked to think about.
besides the besides the killing
Right,
joke.
which is obviously got its whole thing, and then the animated
uh,
movie was so bad too. Um,
I can't think of, that's one of the reasons why I haven't written it, because I
yeah,
need someone who like knows
right.
more about it than I do,
I
and
don't
so we
think
can
there has been.
collaborate together.
Come on,
That's the goal.
yeah. Oh, I love that. I
Anthony
love that so
Birch.
much.
That's who I want. Is Anthony Birch
Okay,
out of
absolutely. Anthony
Dungeons and
Birch, James
Daddies?
Gunn. Listen, I know you're both
Yep.
watching. I need you to get on top of this. Get with my girl Rachel here and make this Oracle shit happen. That would be so
I'll
cool.
tag Anthony Birch right now.
There we go. There we go. There we go. Sue, that's such a cool idea. And again, another thing where it's like you would think it's such a no brainer. That's what I'm looking for. Not simple. It's a no brainer to elaborate on that story, to go even further and to be real about these things, right? Because you do this thing and they do it for shock value and they do it to get more readers or what have you, and then they just kind of dismiss the idea out of hand. And it's like, if you just committed to that and talked to someone who had the experience, right? Talk to someone like you and brought that insight. Wow, what a story you've got. How much more engaged would you that's what they're wanting, right? They're wanting to make money. They're wanting to do their thing. But it'd be so much more fascinating than to just dismiss these things out of hand like they have. But wow, that's really really cool. Um, awesome. I'm trying to see what else. There was other things. So I put in the chat. I put the link tree in there. I want to talk to you just briefly, if we can, about the coloring sheets because I thought that those were really cool.
Yeah.
And what inspired you to do that? Like what? Tell me about these coloring sheets. Like tell me the story.
Well, I love coloring.
Sure.
That's one of my also I have lots of fun recreation things I like to do, but coloring is one of the things I really like doing, and there
Sure.
isn't very much disability representation in the coloring world either. And so whenever we would get the line art from our artist, amazing artist Hekelion, you need to follow them on Instagram and Twitter. They're amazing. They're in our link tree as well.
Awesome.
But Hekelion would send us the line art, and I'd look at it and be like, "Oh, I want to color that." And so instead of just being like, "Oh, that's a wasted piece," whatever, I just threw it on a PDF and called it a coloring sheet, and everyone loves it.
Oh yeah.
And so it's ideally in the future we will have our own coloring book and activity book and bringing in more of my like recreation fun kind of things. So
I love that.
yeah.
I can't wait until you do, and I'm going to be printing these off once. I've got a 9-month-old now. Once she gets a little bit older and she starts coloring, you best believe she's going to be coloring these coloring sheets, man. It's just too cool.
Yes. And we have some
Absolutely
on our Patreon that are Patreon exclusive. Flux. We have some little jelly flux cute moments from our campaign that we've played in,
love
as
it.
well as some rain uh, exclusive. So my character exclusive coloring sheets on our Patreon.
And that's also the link tree has all of these things for those who are watching or will be watching later on. All these things. Another thing I want to talk about too. I'm looking now is I want to talk a little bit about the podcast that you've got in the
Mhm.
link tree, right? And then I want to talk kind of we'll finish up because I know we're getting close to that 30-minute mark, and that's where I kind of wanted to keep things is the chair of equity. Because I
Yeah,
just
the
want
tiered equity is so
it's
cool.
so cool, so neat.
So let me talk about the podcast really quickly because it's
Yes,
not a thing yet. So
cool,
it's something that we want to
exciting,
do. We want to make disability representation in tabletop role playing games specifically more accessible. So you
right?
don't have to listen to critical role length campaigns
Sure.
that are
Oh my
three
God,
hours an
somebody.
episode
Whoo!
for yeah when you're trying to find 5 minutes worth of content for
Yes.
disability representation. Sometimes
Sure.
it's difficult to do that for that.
Yeah.
So we want to do, it's called the disability scene. We want to showcase disability representation one scene at a time. So it's really a 15, 20-minute episode where we will have maybe like a 5 to 10 minute discussion with the person about their character and what
Awesome.
disability they have. And then we'll go into actually playing with that character and how they'd role play, how they do in combat, things like that. And it's a quick episode for you to be able to find what you need.
So it's like an
So that's
actual
the
play,
goal.
but like a snippet, small snippets of it, right? Little brief,
Yeah.
bite-sized actual play podcast. That's really cool. That's an exciting idea. Do you have any idea when you guys are going to timeline wise when you're looking to have that like get started or get rolling?
Ideally it'd be this year.
Okay,
But
it's
GDC has
exciting.
slowed down a lot of things, I'm gonna
Oh
be
sure,
honest.
of course, of
Trying to
course,
get
of
to
course,
GDC
of
took a
course.
lot of it out of us. But
Yeah,
and now we're like, oh, what are we gonna do for next GDC?
sure.
I have a whole idea with my friend Jill about creating like exciting and dangerous accessible areas within
Oh,
like D&D. So
that's
like
so cool.
accessible dungeons that are exciting to play in and things like that.
And so, did they invite you to come back and speak again at the next one?
Not yet.
Not yet.
It's
Okay.
not open yet. We have to
Okay.
do our presentation and submit. But so yeah,
I'm
that's
sure they're
the
gonna. I'm sure they will. Come on. How could they not? You know what I
I
mean? You were the
know,
star
I
of the show
know.
last time. You know what I'm saying? Come on. Got to bring you back.
But yeah, so but the chair of equity is a really cool piece
Yes.
because that was my answer to the trolls, or one of my
Right.
answers to the trolls, right? Where
Right.
they're like, dungeons aren't accessible. Like, how would you ever get through there? Forests aren't accessible. And a lot of the designs for the combat chair are like big major things, right? It's a claw. It's like harpoon guns, right? But
Right.
if you just think about accessibility, right? And you're looking at the environment. So one of those like aspects we haven't talked about with disability is the perspective, the model of disability. So a lot of people see disability through the medical model where our body is what causes the disability.
Yep.
Where we need a cure to fix our bodies to become more normal.
Right.
That's that medical model of disability. The social model of disability showcases that our designed environment around us is to blame for the inaccessibility, not our bodies.
Right.
So that is what we are trying to strive to teach and get people to understand, is shift that perspective into the social model. So this chair of equity, it really is essentially, it levels the playing field for a wheelchair user in combat. So they're in the D&D, like in Sarah Thompson's combat chair mechanics, you can have two upgrades to your chair. So the first upgrade that I put on this chair of equity is dimension door wheels, essentially. Their dimension door is basically, it's a elevator spell in Dungeons and Dragons. So it's like a fantasy door
Right.
pops open, you can push through, and you go like where you want to go. Like if you wanted to be like, oh, I'm going to go up there. So it's an
Takes you
elevator.
there. Right. Right.
But I also, the second one is casters of mold earth. So the front wheels, the little wheels are casters, not like a spell caster, but essentially it's engraving or tread on the outside
Right.
of the wheel with transmutation circles of mold earth. So if you're pushing on dirt, if you're pushing on stone and it's uneven, now it can be even because it's flat earth,
I love
right?
that.
So you're just pushing now.
Yeah.
And so, but the really cool
Cool.
thing is that, yeah, so that's a really cool
Yeah.
element.
That's so neat.
Um, but the great thing about it is that that tread, the casters of mold earth, is really a tread of mold earth, is what I made. And lots of things have tread.
Sure.
So not just wheelchairs, carriages have tread.
Right.
Roller skates, rollerblades, skateboarders, how, like, we all hate tiny rocks. Like us all wheelchair users, we all
Right.
hate tiny rocks.
Sure.
But tiny rocks wouldn't be an issue if you had tread of mold earth.
Come on.
You shoes.
Yeah.
You can have shoes of mold earth that so like people could run and never have difficult terrain as long as
Right.
they're on like an earthy area.
Oh, that's so cool.
Or like I always think of like picnic tables. You can have tread on the bottom of picnic tables, and you always have a level picnic table. I don't know.
I
There's
love
like
it.
lots of
Oh
things.
yeah.
So
A lot of fun
this,
ways. That's one thing about D&D that's so fun
yeah,
too, is you can come up with 1,000 things based off of that really awesome foundation.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that's what's so great is that this is a great example of why you need to be designing for disabled characters, right?
Sure.
You like a lot of people like are hesitant because they're like, oh, why would I design for this small group of people? But if I didn't design this wheelchair for people with disabilities, we wouldn't have tread of mold earth.
Right.
So there is an
That's
element of this design that was designed for people with disabilities that actually benefits everyone, which means I utilize it's a thing called the curb cut effect, which the curb cut is the little ramp and sidewalks
sure.
that you weren't there a long time ago until people with disabilities advocated and said, hey, we need them.
Right.
And then people use them more frequently or use those intersections more frequently because they were better.
Right.
And so other people besides wheelchair users benefited from that curb cut. So that is what we say, like the Snuggie. The Snuggie was designed for people with disabilities, but more people used it, so they rebranded. And
Wow.
your cell phone,
Sure.
you are able to use your cell phone with one hand because of ADA and disability law.
Wow.
Because your touch point, the average touch point is 8 to 10 millimeters wide.
Okay.
So to have an app on your phone, things have to be able to be 9 millimeters of a touch point. And it has to be able to zoom. If it's not zoom, it's not ADA compliant.
Wow.
And so you benefit from the fact that you can use your phone with one hand.
Right.
Or the door buttons, right? So all these things were designed for people with disabilities.
Right.
But they benefit everyone.
Yeah.
And that is what we really want people also to know, is that while yes, you're designing for a smaller group of people, more people are going to benefit.
Yeah.
Like everyone's going to benefit.
You're already living in an imaginary world, right? You're already living in a fantasy. You're already putting your brain in that space. It's not that much more difficult at all to point that in that direction, right? To point that imagination, that creativity in that direction. And like you're saying, you help one person, you help a lot of people, right? Rising tide lifts all boats, so to speak, right? it's such an interesting way to look at it, and it's things that I didn't know. I did not know that about the phones. I didn't know that about, what did you say right before the phones?
The Snuggie.
The Snuggie. Yeah, can we talk about that for a second? So wait, I did not know this.
Mhm.
So it was originally made for disabled. It was meant to be as an accommodation for disabled people.
Yeah, because we
Wow.
can't like if you're sitting in a wheelchair,
Sure.
having a blanket that stayed on us was difficult. So people were just like turning their bathrobes backwards.
Sure.
And so they realized that more people would use it than just wheelchair users. So they
Wild.
redesigned it. Same with the grabber. That a lot of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
as seen
Sure.
on TV stuff,
Yeah.
like a lot of, except for the marshmallow shooter, I would say that is, but that's not an ADA thing.
Hey,
But the
it's still fun.
majority
It's fun for
of
everybody anyway. You know what I mean?
exactly. The majority of things at the as seen on TV stuff were designed for people with disabilities that they rebranded to do for everyone.
I love that. I love that so much. That's amazing. A lot of really cool things. So I want to, like I said, I want to keep this brief. I think it's a fascinating conversation. I'm sure we could go on for much, much longer, but we got things to do, right? We got stuff to get done today. So, really, what I want to ask is like, there's two things that I want to kind of end this with, and one is, well, actually, maybe three. One, I want to know what you're playing right now. Just because I'm curious, right? And then we'll actually let's just go with that. What are you playing right now, tabletop wise, or what have you?
Okay, I will tell you. I'm sorry that I have someone mowing the grass right outside, so
No
I apologize
worries.
if you can't see that. Well, right now, right here, I have the Tales of Zadia
Okay.
role playing game that's right here. Cortex. I love Cortex so much. Everyone should be playing Cortex. Role
Cortex. Okay.
playing. It's
Okay.
a very narrative based system. If you haven't looked at it, you should absolutely do it. I've One of the reasons why I love it, it was designed for game designers to make your own games. And
Ooh.
so you're able to take a piece of, you're like, hey, I want to make a game based off of Shira or
Sure.
something like that.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, it's based, we need high end on relationships. So there's like a whole section about relationships that you'd be able to put in there.
Sure.
And then just it's a Taylor type. You should absolutely check out Cortex role playing. That's what they use for the Dragon Prince Tales of Zadia game. But there's Hammerheads. There's a Greek gods version. There's so many different games in Cortex.
Sure.
I'd absolutely love everyone to do that. And then there is a game under my computer right now that
Okay.
I'm using. I want everyone to start playing. It's a board game. It's Hand to Hand
Wombat.
Wombats.
Okay.
It's by Exploding Kittens. They presented with me at GDC, and just hearing all of the little details that they went through to build this game
Sure.
was amazing. And it was so thoughtful and accessible design from the very beginning, and it's so fun. And Exploding Kittens, all of their games, you
Yeah.
are supposed to be able to learn how to play within 15 minutes, and it takes about 15 minutes to play each round.
Love it.
So even the all of it is accessible. So check out all of Exploding Kitten games, but then Hand to Hand Wombats, definitely check it out.
I love it. I love it. I put that in the chat as well, and I'll make sure to drop links to these things whenever I put this up later. Cool. That's awesome. I knew it would be a good question to ask you, because I knew that anytime you ask any gamer, man, what they're playing, they always got some sort of not cliche, niche thing that you didn't really realize existed. You know what I mean? It's always fun. Always fun. So very cool. Very cool. And then so really, like I said, the thing I want to really kind of wrap this up with is, for you right now, there's a long road ahead, right? There's so many things. There's going to be ups, downs, peaks, valleys. There's going to be so many things that are in the future. What is your ideal, like? What does your ideal future look like when it comes to accessibility in gaming? Like, what do you, if you could give me an elevator pitch on the vision that you have, what is that vision?
My vision is that there are more people, more supporters of disability representation than there are ableist humans.
Love it.
Um, and that's really what we want. Is we want to be able to give the like my philosophy in advocacy, in change, is that there are it's a spectrum. Everything in life is a spectrum.
Everything.
There are the people who are going to fight for you, that are going to be on your side 100% from the very beginning, and then
Right.
there are people who are never going to change,
Right.
who are going to be ableist. They're going to be stuck in their ways for the rest of their life.
Right.
Then there's going to be the people in the middle. That's who we want to focus on.
Sure.
We want to change the minds of the people in the middle, give them as much ammunition as we can with great disability representation, awesome mobility aids that people can use, um, big name games adding disability representation into their games, Wizards of the Coast themselves adding disability representation into their games, um, so that we outnumber the ableist jerks that
Come
can just go
on.
away.
I love that. I love that. What a vision. That's a beautiful vision. And so the second part of that, right, the 1B, I guess, or whatever you want to say, is what can someone like I do? What can someone who isn't in that circle do right now? Or how, like got the link tree. There's all kinds of resources that are available to those who want to look into it, right? Your presentations on there from GDC, a bunch of things like that. But what else can be done from people, those people in the middle, like you're saying, right? Or people who are trying to advocate more? What is something we can do on a regular basis to help give you guys the support that you need and amplify your voice?
I think what the perfect thing that middle area or just the average player,
Right.
casual player can do is increase or reevaluate and understand where you're getting your disability representation from. Are you getting it from James Cameron's Avatar?
Right.
Are you getting it from Forrest Gump?
Right.
Are you getting it
Gross. Come on.
from not like are you getting it from Sia's movie?
Right.
That
Oh,
music
oh
I
my
think is
gosh, that one was also.
is that where you're getting
Yep.
your disability representation from, or are you getting it from people with disabilities? So flood. We are in a great age. Like if you have social media, flood your account. TikTok is just filled with people who are with disabilities trying to share their stories.
Sure.
Follow them. This is the time. Flood your accounts, your streams with great disability representation, and listen.
Absolutely.
That is the best thing that you can do right now.
Awesome. And show support to Forge Ahead. Show support to Rachel here,
Yes.
right? Hype her up. They're doing great, wonderful things. For those of you who are watching this live, thank you for being here. For those of you who are going to watch later, I'm going to blast this out. I'll put this on YouTube and blast that video out everywhere I can. I'll be bugging all kinds of people, letting them know that it's important to listen to what you said here, because I think it's so important. Again, I appreciate you coming in and talking with me about these things, being so forthcoming with what's so important, and being patient, right? And I know that I can be a little all over the place. I appreciate you helping to kind of just educate, right? Because that can be a burden to a lot of people, right? Most of the time, it's that burden of education is a lot, and I appreciate you taking that on for us here and helping to show us the way, in a sense, right? Kind of help us to again shine a light on some things that are not so great, like Avatar, but also celebrate things like what you're doing with GDC, what Forge Ahead is doing, and like all of these wonderful things that we can look forward to in the future. Again, thank you so much for joining. Thank you for everybody else who's watching now. And that's just about it for this episode of Flemma Chats. Rachel, again, thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful day. What a wonderful conversation. What a wonderful conversation. Rachel was fantastic. It was wonderful to learn these things and to talk with her about those things. Again, the link tree's in the chat. I'll go ahead and post that one more time, and I'll make sure to put that in the link for those of you who are watching this on YouTube. I'll put the link tree for Forge Ahead, a party to access, in the description. Wonderful conversation. And remember, these things are so important, right? That's the whole point of what we're doing here, right, on Flemma Chats, is to kind of take these things that are so important, talk about them, shine a light, celebrate things that are wonderful, highlight things that can be changed or need to be changed, right? And again, I'm just so grateful for Rachel hopping in and joining us there. That's it for this episode of Flemma Chats. Thank you so much for everybody coming and joining. Appreciate you guys. Remember, take care of yourselves, love others around you, and be good to each other, right? It's chaos. Be kind. Thank you.